If you know, you know. Welcome to Down Unskilled Replicas. Alright, time to stop sniffing plastic and get back to the salt mines and work on the Predator XP. And really, that's not fair. The Bronco kit is a simple kit. It works as a great palette cleanser after a really big project. But, of course, we're focused on converting it to the export version of the Predator, the XP version. Once the wings have been epoxied into place on the lower fuselage, the rest of the assembly pretty much follows the Bronco kit instructions. And as I glue on the top part of the fuselage here, I like to get that kind of bead of melted plastic to ooze out of the joint there. This will fill the joint, and hopefully it means that there's going to be less filling and sanding later on that joint. You'll find that there's going to be two weird spots on the bottom of the fuselage at the wing trailing edges that need to be filled. Now, these have been on all three kits I've built so far, so I know that they're really there, but it seems unnecessary to have them there. My go-to for spots like this is Tamiya's Basic Putty. It's solvent-based, it adheres well to plastic. You can see here that I've taped off the area that I'm puttying. I get really messy when I'm applying putty, and this is going to keep it confined to the area that really needs it, and it's going to prevent me from having to sand away a lot of detail that really just did not need to get involved in this job. The wings on the Predator are removable, so there really is a panel line or a joint there at the wing root with the fuselage. However, I want to reduce the impression of that joint on the model just a bit. So I'm grabbing Vallejo's acrylic putty, which is my preferred putty when I have an area that I don't really want to have to sand for fear of losing detail in that area, or where I may have difficulty getting in with sandpaper. You can see again I've taped off the area and I'm trying to control the amount of putty that I'm applying here at this joint. Then, because it's acrylic, the excess can simply be wiped off with a cotton swab that's been dipped in water. And it really is as easy as it looks. No sanding required. The kit does not include an AOA boom, but suggests stretching sprue for the boom. At least I think that's what that means. Now, I've never been successful at stretching sprues, so what I've done is drill out a hole and insert a fine pin after I've clipped off the head of the pin. Now, these are fine satin sewing pins, and they have a shaft that's just a little over 1/2 millimeter in diameter, and it seems to work out pretty well for an application such as this. Of course, you know what you have now. You have a lethal weapon, at least the way that I fling these things around as I model. So I will try to put these pins in one of the last things I do before I start painting if I possibly can, and then I will put a piece of foam on the end of that pin. And it does help save me from sticking myself most of the time. And it also keeps the end of that pin bare metal, which is, in my opinion, a pretty effective looking pitot boom in this scale. Okay, on to the last few details. The winglets have been put on now, and there is a panel line there that you can see in photos. So I'm going to use the trick with the acrylic filler, lay that on, and then wipe it off with a Q-tip so that the panel line is still there, but it's just reduced a little bit. It's not quite so obvious, but it's still going to be there as I see in reference photos. Don't forget the air data probes on the wings. They are really hard to get on, but there are mounting locations in the 3D printed wings for them, just as there are in the kit. Back to my reference photo, there are two football-shaped transponders on the XP, one on the bottom there that has a blade sticking out of it, and one on the top. So we need to get those onto our kit as well. And of course, check your own reference photos, but there are additional antennas included with the conversion kit, so hopefully you'll have everything that you need for what your reference photos indicate. The kit already has a mounting location for a transponder on the bottom of the fuselage, so I went ahead and used one from the conversion set and superglued it into that location. The kit does not have a corresponding mounting location for a transponder on top, so I drilled a hole there, went ahead and mounted one out of the conversion set, again using CA glue. And that wraps up all the initial assembly for this week. It's time to go get some primer on this, so we'll check back again next time. Back to the Convair Space Shuttlecraft, and it's assembly time, which is a lot of fun for me. The shuttle itself has a flat bottom on both the aft fuselage section that's shown here as well as the main fuselage section. And you can see I've got them just taped together to hold them into place, and I'm running liquid plastic weld into the joints and just sort of pushing them down a little bit, trying to get a little bit of a bead there, making sure that I'm getting the weld into all the seams there. And it's a pretty quick process because this plastic weld sets up pretty quick, and I can take the tape off in short order. But you can see that there's going to be a lot of joints and holes on the bottom of the shuttle area, and that's going to be a real nightmare for filling and sanding. So these need to be seamless on the final product. I've grabbed some thin sheet styrene, it's a 1/4 millimeter thick, to glue over the entire bottom of the shuttlecraft. You can see I'm just placing it on there roughly, and I'm going to use, again, plastic weld on the bottom of this. And now I'm going to speed this up and I'm going to show you the entire process. First, I put down a piece of paper to protect my working surface. And this is going to be a compromise, using enough plastic weld to melt the plastic on both the shuttle and the sheet, but not so much that it's going to warp that very thin plastic sheet styrene. And then I'll get it down on the plastic sheet there, make sure that it's really firmly put on there, and then I'm going to go around all of the edges again with plastic weld just to make sure that those edges are firmly welded then to the plastic sheet. And I don't have any gaps there. That means I'm not going to have to go back with any putty and do any filling and sanding along those edges, just enough sanding to get the plastic sheet trimmed down. Now I did this to the main fuel tank as well as the shuttle itself, and once I'm done and the glue is set up, I'll go along the edges and trim off that thin plastic styrene sheet. I'll get as close to the edge as I'm comfortable getting, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so, and then after that is trimmed off, I'll go around with the sandpaper and do the final cleaning up on the edges. On the booster itself, on the rocket, I've got a really long seam on both sides that needs to be filled. So I'm going to do something here that I've never done before. This is just going to be an experiment. I'm going to make a styrene slush or filler here. So how I start out is I just grab a piece of sprue out of the kit itself, and I'm running it along a file here just to grind it down and get myself some styrene powder, really. And I'm doing this on a piece of paper. I'm going to take that piece of paper then, and I'm going to put it into a metal paint palette here that just have these little bowls here. And so that's going to be what I work in to create this plastic slush that I'm going to use to fill these seams. So I just start by putting a few drops of plastic weld into one of the little bowls. It is weld on number 3, and I'm going to use a toothpick to just start mixing this together, and I'll just continue to add weld on until it gets to the consistency that I want to put onto the seam. I think that's just about got it to where I want it to be. So I'm going to grab the booster here, and you can see I've taped off either side of the joint there just to control how much area is going to be affected by this this plastic putty, and I just start smearing it in there with a toothpick. Like I said, I've never done this before, so I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, but I'm just going to start smearing it in here and filling that joint with this slurry as best I can. And once I've done this, I'm going to let this sit overnight. I'm going to take the tape off first, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight, come back, do some sanding, prime it, and see how it looks. And you know, after all that, I'm not terribly unhappy with how this looks. There's a little detail on there I need to go work on. It doesn't really show up on the video very well, but for my first try in doing this, I'm not unhappy with the way it worked out. For the top end or the front end of the booster, I have painted the cap of the fuel tank as well as the structure that goes around it, and now I need to put the two together. I painted them first because it was just going to be too difficult to get in there with the airbrush when they were assembled. So now we use CA glue on this, super glue on this, because of course plastic weld won't work on these resin parts, and I simply run very thin CA glue into the joints between the two parts, and that will be more than sufficient to hold them together. In fast motion, I'm going to mix up some 2-part epoxy. It's 5-minute epoxy to glue that part into the fuselage. I'm just going to smear that epoxy into the inside of the fuselage there. Clean up just a little bit there, then go ahead, slow down, and insert that part in real time. That will be more than sufficient to hold that into place. It's taken me quite a while, longer than I anticipated, to get everything filled and sanded and to the point where it can be primed. And they're now in white primer. There is some color on some of the parts that are going to be really hard to get at once they're assembled. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that things have turned out here, how it's coming along. But it just occurred to me that I really haven't thought about how I want to paint all of these parts, what I want the final paint scheme to look like. White with some kind of black details on them, sort of a Saturn V feel going on there, but I really haven't thought it through yet. So I guess I'm gonna have to spend a few days sketching some things out, just getting a feel for how I want to paint these parts. I don't know how that's gonna end up looking. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel here, and I'll keep you updated on how things are looking. Thanks for joining me. Happy modeling.